Hi everyone, I'm Marie and we are coming to you live from Living Felt because it's Happy Woolly Wednesday! Oh hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. In today's live show, we have some fun things to go over with you. We are going to go over felting needles, help you demystify them. We're going to share with you our fun new storage solution that will help you travel with them, keep them organized and well sorted. And we're going to just go over the various shapes and sizes and help you figure out what felting needles to use for the project you're working on. And then in the second part of the show, we want to go over felt versus pre-felt and help you also learn what to choose for that. So I hope it's very informative. Know that you can post your questions and commentary over in the live chat. There's already a lot of activity happening over there. So thank you everyone for being here and joining us for that. I want to say hi to a couple of people. I see Svetlana is with us, Jane just across the border in Louisiana, Linda Reeder in Tennessee. So many of our good old usual friends are here with us. Hi to Maureen in Canada and Catherine in Georgia, Connie also in Canada, Kat in Pennsylvania. Thanks everyone for being here and just making it a fun Wednesday. For those of you who don't know us, we are Living Felt based in Central Texas. All of you are all over the world and we love that we get to share this time with you. So join in the chat. You get entered to win prizes. If you're watching the replay, thanks for being here. Comment down below because you get a chance to win prizes too. On that note, last show we made our Woodsy Owl. So many of you got the kit. Thank you so much for that. We're loving seeing what you've made in our Facebook group. So keep posting your pictures there. And we'd like to give away 2 prizes right now to people who commented after the live show last week. Laura Devers in Ohio and Gladys Harstad in North Dakota. Congratulations y'all. You win a size run of our glass eyes in the color black so you can know what size you need for your next project. Now, as usual, the most magical of fairies are all lined up right here in the studio with me, and they're going to share a few things that you might consider for your fall felting fun. And the first up is the very magical fairy. Who's first? Alyssa!
Hello! Today I'm going to show you our 100% wool felt sheets. They are in the size 8 by 12 inches. This is a bundle. It's called Fall Festival. It comes with 6 different felt sheets. And they're perfect for needle felting a 2D picture onto, and they're perfect for your fall felting fun. Up next is Fairy Angela.
Yay! Hey y'all, now that it's fall, probably want to make some pumpkins. So this is our fairy tale pumpkin kit. It comes with everything you would need to make this pretty little guy, except for the needles and foam. And this is available now under the Needle Felting Kits tab. And up next is the wonderful Fairy Trish.
Yay! Hey y'all, so Marie mentioned she's going to go over all the needles with you today. This is our super variety pack. It's got every needle that we carry. You get 3 of each, and it now includes our star spiral. Also, these are something she mentioned. It's our little tubes for the needles. You can store them, carry them, whatever you want to do with them. So I'll turn it over to Marie.
Woo! And no show is complete without our fairy in the field, the very funny Fairy Kayla.
Hey everybody, happy Woolly Wednesday! Fairy Kayla here, just wanted to pop in and share some quick funniness with you for the week. So I'll cut right to the chase. Why does Humpty Dumpty love autumn?
Why does Humpty Dumpty love autumn?
He loves autumn because he had a great fall. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you have fun felting today, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kayla, and thanks to all the fairies. If y'all don't know, this is our crew. They pack your orders, answer your emails, answer the phone, make absolutely everything that we sell, and already right now they're trying to scurry back to work and get busy making things. So thank you all very much for joining us today. Jordan is in the studio with me, and our job today is to answer your questions and help demystify some of these things around felting needles. And so please post your questions in the chat so we can be a support support for you there. You're on our channel, so you already know what needle felting is or what felting needles are for. But we're going to just break that down into the simplest of form today, do a little bit of demonstration, and maybe help you identify felting needles that you already have, or maybe identify some felting needles that you would like to have. Before I jump into that, I just want to comment on what Trish was showing you. She was showing you our super variety pack, which includes the 11 different sizes of felting needles that we carry. That's what we'll be looking at today. And from this day forward, our felting needles are going out with tubes. And I showed you those a little bit on the pre-roll. These tubes, you know, I know that it's very challenged to store your felting needles or how to organize your felting needles, and so we've made these tubes just for that purpose. We're still in the process of going from our needle cards to these needle tubes, so for now the needle tubes will be included with your order until such time that they just come in the tubes and they're already ready for you. So when you get an order of felting needles, they will have the label on them so you know what size they are. And then for those who already have needles, we're selling the tubes in a set, and they're going to come with some labels that you might use to codify what those tubes are. Okay? Now, in talking about these felting needles, pretty much what we are breaking them down into are coarse, medium, and fine needles for compression. Felting needles compress the wool. They have one-way barbs on the shaft of the needle that grabs onto the fiber, entangles it, and causes it to compress or mash together. Felt together is what we call it. Then we also have reverse needles, which go backwards. Let's start with just looking at the compression needles. Again, as I mentioned, we're going to break them down into coarse, medium, and fine. But before we drill into the details, let's look at the shapes. We have some close-up video for you here so you can see the different styles of felting needles that are made. We're going to start by looking at a triangle. The shaft of the needle is flattened into 3 sides, and the notches that grab onto the wool are on the corners. That was a triangle. And then here it's going kind of fast. This one here is a spiral. I can't see. Oh, it's a star. So a star has like extra edges by running a groove down the shaft of the needle. Then we can put the notches on the corners of those bends that we make in the end of the shaft. And then we have a spiral. A spiral needle is basically a triangle with a twist. So the notches are spaced out in a different manner. And then a quick look here at a star spiral. So a star needle with a twist. Lots more notches, but they're spaced differently. And this is our 38 star spiral you're looking at. And then it might be hard to tell, but this is a reverse needle. So the notches actually go in the opposite direction. And a reverse needle is designed to pull wool out or pull it through a surface layer. Those are the basic shapes of your felting needles, and then we're going to look together at maybe what are the best uses for these different types of needles, given that this is very subjective. You as the artist, as the creator, are going to have your favorites, and I find that most people I meet have 2 to 4 go-tos that they use all the time. Some have only one. And here we hope just to help you make sense of them and encourage you to try the different ones and see what you like. Let's start with the coarse needles, and I have them right here on my table. We're working on our wow pad today, and this is a 32 triangle and a 36 triangle. These two are the most coarse felting needles that we carry. A coarse felting needle is going to push more wool than a medium or fine needle. The barbs are larger. We're going to use our little fall gnome here guy to show you what these guys do. The barbs are larger than on a medium or fine needle, and they push more wool. I like to use coarse felting needles. See how I'm making a big hole here? Not really ideal, not really what it's intended for. I like to use a coarse felting needle to create base shapes, such as under shapes for a sculpture, really firm foundations, maybe to when I'm making the initial layers on an armature. We also like to use these for creating very deep lines and holes, like an eye socket. So an example would be a pumpkin. I almost always like to go to a pumpkin because they have lines. This is a very firm pumpkin. You can see he's very, very dense. And I would use a coarse needle to really go in and accentuate all of these deep lines and ridges. Another great use for a coarse needle is to attach things. So for example, maybe you have a lock or other fibers that you want to attach, maybe even attaching this stem, and you want to anchor it really well. A coarse needle is really going to push that fiber deeply into the base fiber below and give you a very good attachment. So coarse needles are great for this. What we find when you're working with the coarse needles is that as you build up an undershape that is very, very dense, it can get to the point where it's too dense to keep going, meaning you're building up layers, and it's very hard, or the needle really resists the surface and wants to begin to bow or bend. And if that's the case, it's probably time to add more layers or switch to a more medium needle for that compression. So coarse needles, I use them mostly on 3D or where you're building up shapes, a firm foundation, deep lines, eye sockets, and holes. If you're going to make something with an eye socket, let's say something like my little koala bear here. If I'm building up this foundation underneath and I want to make an eye socket in this piece, it's important not to make the underlayer rock hard before I get the eye socket in place. Otherwise, I can poke for days and not get the valley that I need to create to insert that eye. So make sure you switch to a medium needle once you start to build up that undershape where you need it. Should I pause in between, Jordan, or no questions yet?
We have a few.
Okay.
Let's see. So how deep do you poke into the needle, kind of?
Oh, that's a great question. So when you're making a shape, let's just use our little ball here. There's no reason to go past the shaft of the needle. Like, look at this up close. So the shaft of the needle, where the notches are, there's no reason to really go past where those notches are. So if you're poking into a shape, I like to go to the middle. As an example, if I'm making a large, this is a little thing, let's say I'm making a large thing, and that's coming back. If I'm making a large piece like this, I'm not going to form one great big ball and then start needle felting. Instead, I'm going to make a ball, needle felt it firmly, add to it, add to it, add to it. So therefore, as you are needle felting, you want to build up layers that aren't deeper than the shaft of your felting needle. Also, when we're making a 3D shape, we really only want to go to the middle. Every distance you push that needle past the middle, you're pushing fiber towards the other side. So you want to go to the middle of that piece, and that's why you really only want to plunge your felting needle as deep as the notches on the shaft. I hope I answered that well. Cool.
I think so.
Okay. So coarse needles, building up shapes and building up a firm foundation. Now, let's look at medium needles and then we'll answer some questions as well. We have medium needles I put for 38, size 38. Now we looked at the shape a moment ago, but if I were to classify my 38 triangle needles, and the gauge I didn't mention, I'm sorry. So the gauge of a felting needle, the higher the number, the finer the needle. The higher the number, so high, fine, low, coarse. 38s are right in the middle. We currently have 4 different styles of 38 gauge felting needle. If I were to think of them from coarse to fine, the 38s, I would start with that 38 star spiral. The 38 star and the 38 star spiral are really close cousins. And the 38 star, a star is designed, I'm saying, we showed you up close what they look like, but a star is designed to push the most wool. Triangles came first, and then I think stars came next, and then spirals came later. The spiral goal is to leave less of a mark. A 38 star is a great workhorse needle, and I use it for all of my undershaping, maybe even shaping something like this hat, where we want to get these nice crooks in it and these nice shapes. You might remember our ice cream cone hat, which we've made together in the past. So getting these great swoops and dupes in here, you can use your workhorse needles like a 38 or 38 star, 38 spiral. So 38 star is aggressive. A 38 spiral is designed to leave a little less of a needle mark. And a 38 star spiral is the bringing together of those two. So 38 is your workhorse. However, a 38 triangle, to me, is on the fine side of medium. We most often use these in tools because they're not overly aggressive. They are designed to push wool well, but in a cluster, they're not so coarse that you don't get too much surface tension to use them in a group. So very often in a tool or a tool of several needles, you'll either have a 38 triangle or a 40 triangle. So a 38 triangle is on the fine side of medium. It's most often what we use when we're working with people who are brand new or children, because they're just like right in the middle and they're not so intense that they're going to bow or bend or break very, very easily. So they are a good workhorse, but a 38 triangle is more fine, and it's on the fine side of medium, and it's probably good in a cluster of tools. Hope I said that well. Okay, our fine needles are really more for the medium needles I most often use in 3D sculpture, some 2D, but more often I use fine needles for 2D work. So fine needles for 2D and for surface design on 3D. So if we're putting our top layer on something, if we're doing needle felting onto linen or felt or other fabric, then I usually go to my fine needles. What we see is the notches on a coarse needle are bigger. They're going to push more wool, but that also means they're going to leave a bigger hole, and fine needles are going to leave less of a mark. For our fine needles, we have a 40 triangle, a 40 triangle, a 40 spiral, and a 42 triangle. You see me use this one very often, and I use one of these when I'm still in that finishing stage, but I want to push a little more wool. I want to get it to do a little more of what I want it to do. So the triangle again is like the most common, but if you're finding that you're trying to finish something like a piece like this little hat, you're trying to finish it and you're not happy with all those needle marks, get the wool kind of compressed to where you want, and or switch to a fine needle at some point so that you can start to affect that surface differently. If I work with a 42 triangle, which is my finest needle, when I'm poking, I have no resistance. So what happens is that felting needle will just plunge into the wool and leave a surface mark. But if I want to shape and smooth this and leave less of a needle mark, that's when you see me using a little grouping, just a rubber banded cluster of my 42 triangles, because it is going to compress more gradually. It's like patting something down flat versus trying to poke a little teeny tiny point. So when I am finishing a piece or I'm putting a top layer on, if you feel patient, then a cluster of 3 to 4 to 5 fine needles can help you get that top surface layer on and leave less of a needle mark while you work. Anytime getting needle marks out is going to take your time and your patience to do that. And what you'll find is that the more compressed the fiber is, the easier it is to get the needle marks out. And while I say, my gnome is flying, while I say get the needle marks out, really what I consider is going after all these other bits of wool that are still kind of poking up. So rather than worry about needle marks, I want to go in and flatten all the other areas of wool and get them nicely compressed so that I could rub against it and it's not loose and I can't mess it up. As an example, let me show you these pumpkins real quick. This is, we have 2 different pumpkins made by 2 different people. This pumpkin is very firm and the wool is very well applied and it's nicely felted. It's going to hold up for a long time to wear and tear. This pumpkin was made by somebody who was brand new, beautiful looking pumpkin, but I want you to see how loose all of this wool is and how I can mush it, and I could actually tear this fiber right off. So this would be a great exercise in patience to go through and just needle felt this pumpkin. If I use a coarse needle on the face of this sweet little guy, it is going to just, you can see how much it compresses, how much it leaves a big mark, and it wouldn't be very satisfying. If you wanted to work on this and keep the same shape, well then try gradually working at it with fine or medium felting needles and going at it, sculpting it from the sides of the shape and gradually compressing that down more. But what we're going for when we're needle felting is a really nice firm shape like this. We're a nice smooth compression, and we don't want it loose so that it could get all roughed up like this. So fine needles are really for getting that nice finish, but you need a firm underbase in order to achieve that. That was a quick run through of coarse, medium, and fine. What commentary or questions should we tackle on that note?
You have been answering quite a few questions already in chat. Let's see.
Thanks y'all for being here.
So we have a few people asking, like, what is the range that we have? So what's our coarsest and our finest needle?
The coarsest, so I had them in order. I presented them in order. So the coarsest needle is a 32. That's the lowest number in our scale. So a 32 triangle is the most coarse felting needle that we carry, and a 42 triangle is the finest that we carry at this time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Svetlana asks, what needle could I use after wet felting to fix some fibers?
It's a great question, and it really depends on how well felted what you have is in place. So needle felting onto something that's been wet felted is very common, and you just need something that's going to give you the finish that you need. So if the whole piece is very loose, then you may want to felt it some more, but you're in the surface design phase, and so the question is, are you just adding to the surface design and you want it to be nice, flush, and smooth? I would probably be working with a fine needle like a 42 triangle or a 40, but if you're trying to attach something such that it's going to become a relief or sticking off, then you probably want to be working with a 38 somewhere in there. Could be a star or spiral. Why don't I pull just a couple of examples to show you of things that have been one of them has been wet felted. So this we're going to use for our pre-felt talk, but here's an example of a piece made by Catherine McClellan. She's an artist. You might see her on Instagram or on TikTok. This piece here, the background was wet felted, and then she needle felted this beautiful portrait of Oprah on top. It's just so fantastic. But this was a wet felted base that she then needle felted, wet felted, needle felted, wet felted, needle felted. So this has been done many times. This is also a very smooth finish, so fine felting needles would be ideal for this, but it really depends on what treatment you're going to have after. Some people would use a medium or aggressive felting needle because they're going to wet felt it more. If you had wet felted a little base and then you want to create a little picture and attach some, this is like a playful little picture we did a while ago, and we added locks and neps and funky stuff on top. Well, you could use a more medium felting needle for this because we're attaching big globby things to it. So this is on our YouTube channel somewhere, and we did our fiber mishmash where we created all this stuff and added accent. So those are just some examples, and for attachments of things sticking off, usually I'm thinking of a 38, but if you want it to be very smooth, then go with a fine like a 42. Good question.
For an absolute beginner who just needs a few needles, what ones would you recommend?
It's a great question. So if you just need a couple of needles, go for a variety pack. We offer a variety pack of a 36 triangle, a 38 triangle, and a 40 triangle. In that, you're going to get coarse, medium, and fine, but not the extremes. And I lived for years with those 3 sizes of felting needles and made everything. So start with a variety pack. It's 3 needles, 3 different sizes, or if you're worried about breakage or you want to share, then get, one of each pack. So a variety pack for us has 1 of each of those size needles. Otherwise, if you buy a single style of felting needle, you can get 3 in a pack. But that's what I would start with, a variety. Good question.
Do certain gauge needles tend to break more often?
That is a great question. So do certain gauge needles tend to break more often? It really depends on what you're using them for. The finer needles can be a little more fragile than a coarse needle, but a coarse needle driven into something where there's a lot of resistance is going to break. So if you have a cluster, let's say you have a cluster of felting needles together, if I have a bunch of coarse needles in this tool and I try and drive it through a fabric, or one time someone called me and said, I keep breaking all my felting needles. I said, what are you felting? Well, I'm just felting a bunch of stuff together. What are you felting together? Fabric, ribbon, including, there was some denim in the fabric, ribbon, fiber, all the stuff. And she was thinking that more coarse needles jammed together would felt all that stuff together. But what you have with a coarse needle in a cluster, or when there's a bunch of resistance, they want to grab onto a bunch of things at once and you get a bunch of surface tension. There's a bunch of resistance underneath, so they're going to bow or bend. The more coarse stuff, if you want to use a cluster, go for finer needles actually. So just watch for the surface tension. The one thing that breaks needles the most often is that we try and use the felting needle to bend or push wool. So you always want to go in and out at the same angle. You don't want to cause anything that will put a bow or a bend in the tip. That's the part that's fragile. So I don't think there's one size that will break more often. It's really how you're using it. And the other thing is if you hit an armature. So if you have anything with an armature, try and build up your fiber very, very tightly as much as you can, and then needle felt at angles so you don't bang into the wire. That's the other thing that tends to break it. Or honestly, I break more needles by just putting them in my foam and then bending over to get something, and then I'll break it in my foam. So that's where I tend to break them. What else?
Speaking of armature, do you recommend a specific needle for securing wool to an armature?
I would, if I'm putting wool on an armature, it really depends. Which needle I use depends on what that piece is. So if I'm going to make something delicate, like our little witch doll here, which we made, I don't know where she'll show, but we made her, I want to say last year, this cute little witch doll. This is a very delicate little armature, so I'm going to be using my finest needles. If I'm going to make something large, even something a little bit bigger than this, I might use a medium needle. He's a little bit bigger, he's a little bit thicker. If I'm going to make something large, like an animal structure or my large doll behind me, this guy back here, this is Stash. He's about 30 inches if you were standing. That's a lot of wool to build up. So underneath, there's a lot of fiber. The wire is very big. And I'm going to use my coarse needles for that. So it will vary, and it's just going to depend on how thick the fiber is you're putting on top of the wire. On all aspects of that, you're going to want to build up in layers. So yes, I hope that helps.
Do felting needles dull over time?
That's a great question, and we hear that question all the time. Do felting needles dull over time? I imagine they do. But it's going to be relative to what you're driving them through. Felting needles are designed for industry. This is the instance where crafters or artisans went to industry and took something to make it by hand. So industry created the felting needles to emulate what people were making by hand with wet felting. And then about 100 years later, some artisans went and took those felting needles and decided to work with them by hand. So these are designed for machine. They're designed for thousands and thousands of punches over time. So if they were just used for the purpose intended, driven through loose fiber to felt it, they really wouldn't dull very much over time. But if you're driving them through fabric and thicker things, banging into things, then they're going to be more likely to dull. I usually find that I have needles that I can wear the paint off and they still work fine. If it feels like your needle's not working, try a new one or switch to a different size. But they really are designed, I think, for many more repetitive pokes than hand felters use them for. That's my philosophy.
Chloe asks, do you have any tips for taking out broken needle pieces from your felted creation?
Yeah, Chloe, I don't. I mean, if you break a needle in a piece, it is very dangerous to leave it in there. I like to think about, where's this piece going to be in 10 years or 15 years? I mean, sometimes you have to let the piece go. But if you have a needle embedded in a piece, what I would do is try, if you know where it is compress the piece or squeeze the piece so that you can find it. And if you can locate it, then go after it with a pair of tweezers or a tool. And if you just can't find it, another thing you could do, but if you know where it is and you can't get it out, is you could cut it out. You could, cut the piece open to remove it and then close the piece back up with felting. But I would really encourage that you don't let a piece go that has a felting needle in it, because you never know if a dog or a child in the future is going to get a hold of that thing. Even if you never intended for it to happen, it could end up being gifted, re-gifted, thrifted, who knows. So try not to let those go out if there's a broken felting needle in there. Yeah, good question.
Lily asks, can you get unpainted needles?
We do carry, we sell them, so we color code them here ourselves. So yes, you can get uncolor coded felting needles. For us, if you just want to buy a 3-pack, then just request unpainted in the comments. I think some of them that are very common in tools, we even have that option on the page. If we sell our wholesale needles in 25 packs and 100 packs, those are not color coded. So yes, those come unpainted. Absolutely. Thank you for that.
A few people would like to see a reverse needle demonstration.
Okay, right on cue, right on cue. Okay, so I have here one of our little fur bits. Here's 2 fur bits. This is a fur bit, no face, no arms, no legs. This is a fur bit with eyes. Where does he go? Right here. This is a fur bit with eyes. Fur bits are something we came up with a couple of years ago as little practice buddies to help you create long fur, work with different techniques, work with the combs, whatever. So this guy's made with merino top. We gave him another eyeball in a repeat session. So he's made with merino top. He's very, very fine, and he's going to mat pretty well over time. This guy is made with New Zealand Corriedale, and in this video we taught you 2 different fiber or hair techniques, if you will. One is fluffy and trimmed, and one is more like stacked, more like you might use for a pony or a cow or something short hair. So this is a fur bit. Now on this fur bit, on the underneath side, I decided to give him a nice little orange underbelly, and then I'm just going to put some fiber on top, and we can look at how our felting needles work with that, and we'll build up to this really quickly to do our little reverse needle. So this is wool batting. We probably need to be overhead for that. This is wool batting, and I am going to, where am I? Sorry. Let's use our fine cluster right here on this side. Really fast compression. If I was at home, this is the tool I would be using to do that, to put on a surface layer of color. Quick, really fast, cheap. A rubber band is cheap. I always have them. I have bags everywhere of rubber bands. So that's a real quick compression of that. Let's use a medium needle. In this case, I'll use a 38 star spiral for the next compression. Just get this wool laying down. And this is just going to allow you to see how these different needles treat that surface. And then we'll finish the last little strip off with, let's go with our coarsest needle, which is a 32 triangle. See, it's harder for me to get in. It's going to leave much deeper marks. Just deeper compression overall. Big plunging. I treat this more like a sledgehammer. This is more like using a sledgehammer. This is a sledgehammer. This might be a regular hammer, and then these guys are like a little finishing hammer, so much more smooth. Now that we have this in place, the reverse needles, we have 36 and 38, so the coarser needle is going to pull more wool out. So as I mentioned, a reverse needle is designed to, let's see, oh, I'm going all the way to the core wool, so that's not even going to help. The underneath, whatever is underneath is what you're pulling out with the reverse needle, and as you can see, this is going all the way to the inner layers and starting to give me white spots. When you use a reverse needle, whatever is underneath is what you're pulling through to the top. So even though we have this little orange thin layer there, you can see that this needle is going all the way in to the surface. Now, this is not ideal for making a fuzzy surface. You would have it would be ideal to have a fiber underneath that is a little longer. But you can also try and pull that orange like from an angle a little bit sideways and get a little more of the orange underneath. So this is going to create kind of a fuzzy or furry surface, but what you have underneath really matters. Sometimes when people are wanting a furry surface, really what they're wanting is something like my little koala face here. Well, let's show this a little bit on the side, this koala face. Sometimes what you're wanting is something that really looks a lot more like fur. So look at this fur. Can you see that he looks furry? We're getting all backwards here. He looks furry. This is not done with a reverse needle. This fiber has been applied and then trimmed. But if you had some bare spots here that you weren't exactly happy with, because the fiber underneath kind of matches and this fiber is in between, you could use the reverse needle and pull out a little bit more just to give them a little bit more of a furry appearance. So when I'm using a reverse needle, what I usually do them for are little spots and little surface treatments, or maybe like little tiny stripes. But if you're going for something that's really a furry appearance, then I would say apply the fur. Like if you want this ear part just a little more furry, fluffy right there, like here you could use it just to fluff it out a little bit. And he's already furry, so it may not seem like it has a great effect, but what it does is it gives you a nice transition in between that felt on the ear and this other furry part right there. So reverse needle is going to pull through whatever is underneath. And that's a visual of what that looks like. I'm not sure if we caught that, but I hope it answered the question. Okay, anything else on that?
Not yet.
Okay, so reverse needles go in and nothing happens, and when they come out, like you feel it. If you step them into your foam or your felt, you're gonna hear it when you go to pull it out. So they're not really ideal to store in your foam because they're gonna really grab on and lift that up. So yeah, reverse needles. Okay, coarse, medium, fine. If you're not sure what you have, try just poking them and feeling those effects. If you've bought needles somewhere else, you're not sure what the sizes are, try just coordinating them into coarse, medium, and fine. If you decide to get our tube pack, we're going to give you a little, our pack of 12, because you just want to group your own needles that you have or store the needles that you have. We're going to give you a little sticker pack, and at least some of those say coarse, medium, and fine. So if you just don't know, then you can try and group them that way. Yeah.
We have a question on the tubes. Are they plastic or glass?
The tubes are plastic. Yes, plastic is what we went for. So they're really great to see through. I carry one in my purse all the time, and this way you can separate them and have them all in the individual sizes that you want. So to me, it's just a great way to store and organize them. Travel, you can put them in your carry-on luggage or in your suitcase if you're going somewhere. And just makes it easier to fish them out.
Jan Scott shares a tip that you can put a little bit of wool in the bottom of the tube to help protect the tips.
Oh, that makes sense. Good thinking. Tubes to protect the tips. Okay, cool. So do we feel pretty good about felting needles? Okay, good. I wanted to cover with you felt versus pre-felt. It is a question that we get a lot of the times, and I brought in some samples here for you to look at the difference of felt versus pre-felt. Felt versus pre-felt. Which do you use for what? I have here this is a big, beautiful stack of felt. And I'm going to talk you through this stack of felt right here. This, I like to make samples. We have a wet felt, we have a little intro to wet felting in the school, and where I teach you to make samples. This is felt made from pre-felt. This happens to be made from our Pfm Prefelt, and I know because I have a little tag here. This is handmade felt. This is made from a merino short fiber bat. This is handmade felt. This is made from merino top. This is handmade felt. This is made from our core wool. These right here are 2 pieces of handmade felt made from our wet felting activity packs, and you can see they have some nice luster fibers in the top. These 2 pieces are commercial felt. It's our 1 millimeter felt that we sell in the shop. So it's very thin, very uniform, a solid color. And this piece I came across today was really fun. I made it almost 20 years ago. This is handmade felt. It's been wet felted, and it's very, very thick. I made this for having a pair of shoes sewn for me. So felt, in its definition, is a fabric. This is a fabric or a material, so in the shape of a 3D material or substance that is wool fibers that have been matted together, and maybe it's going to have other fibers in there as well, but felt is something that's already felted. Pre-felt, on the other hand, is something that has been partially felted. I brought in some examples of pre-felt for you to look at. Just a couple, not really too many. Here we go. I'll start with the bottom this time. This right here is our Pfm Prefelt. We call it light because it's a wider felt than our Pfm Prefelt, and it tends to be a little bit thinner, and it has like a single layer of material, so like you wouldn't pull that apart. It's very thin. It wet felts beautifully. It's made from a long fiber, and it's going to feel a little more compressed than our Pfm Prefelt. So this is designed to be finished with a wet felting process. This is our Pfm Prefelt. These are both made with 19.5 micron merino top, but this one is a little more loose and lofty. You could separate it if you wanted to, and we did that in a recent video where we felted just half of it. But this is very nice and next to the skin. It's actually made from a short fiber. So this is made from a long fiber. This is made from a short fiber. They're going to behave a little differently, but they're both beautiful for wet felting. This is our Pfx Pre-Felt. This is just a cut of it. It's rather thick. It's a lot more coarse. It's less felted. It's a pre-felt, but it's less felted. You could peel the thickness if you want. And while these two are great for next to the skin, we really like this for a base of, let's say, a picture or a project that you're going to needle felt on. So this is our Pfx Pre-Felt. And then I brought in some handmade pre-felts. I think we looked at doing these together. This is a nanofelt pre-felt, so a piece of fabric lightly bonded to merino top that you can cut a shape out of to create a design in your work. This is the same fabric, lightly bonded to our Pfm Prefelt so that you could create, cut out a shape. An example is this. This is a pre-felt circle that I made using nice, just merino top and this is actually Margalon rarefied silk on top. But the nice thing about making a pre-felt is that you can cut out a shape and wet felt it into a piece when you make your own. And then these are just two little bits of pre-felt. This one is made from merino top, and this is lightly felted pre-felt. Where would you use these and how would you use these things? I want to show you some examples so you can think about it and think about how these things are used. Pre-felts really are designed to give you a quick base layer, whether you're going to wet felt a wearable, wet felt a wall hanging, wet felt just like a base background for a picture. They're designed to give you an even layer or sometimes to give you a custom design. So by that I mean, if we look at this little piece, this is our Mosaic Felt fabric. We made this together. As a result, it was like the third part in a series. We made handmade pre-felts, we used commercial pre-felts, and we used our silky papers and then cut those into these mosaic style shapes to create this fabric and then hand stitch on top. So sometimes a pre-felt is going to allow you to cut out shapes and incorporate them into a larger body of work. As I mentioned here with this Oprah piece, this gorgeous work by Catherine McClellan, she used our Pfm Prefelt as a background. She wet felted it so that she could get it to a stage that she could needle felt on top of it in this fine detail, and then repeatedly wet felted it and needle felted it. And you can see this beautiful thing come to life on her Instagram. I even think we shared the progress on our Instagram as well. So sometimes a pre-felt, in this case, she wanted that uniform base layer, but she did wet felt the piece before she needle felted on it. Different from that is this really fun class by Laura Ricks in our school, feltingtutorials.com. Laura likes to use pre-felt as a base layer, but she tends to use that pre-felt as a base layer. She needle felts on top and then wet felts the design and then adds more detail with needle felting. It's really a lot of fun. In fact, Kimberly Pulley in her Blossom class does the same thing, uses a base layer, needle felts on top, wet felts. So pre-felt can be a base layer for something, but what we want to really point out is that it by itself is too delicate to really be a strong base layer for something that's just needle felted 100%, because any area that you don't needle felt is still going to be fragile and delicate. Okay, so it is designed to be wet felted. I see someone's asked, can I show the back of Oprah? Here she is, just as glorious actually, like the ghost of Oprah, the essence of Oprah. There she is. So that's the background. You can see how much fiber is coming through. Which brings me to a point of talking about your choice of felting needle when you're creating a 2D piece. There really is no reason to push too much wool to the back side, and this is why I tend to like to use a fine needle on 2D. Why have so much of your wool on the back side of your piece when really what we want is that wool to sit right on top and create a gorgeous image. So if you do choose a medium fine or a very fine needle in creating your 2D works, more of that fiber is going to sit right on top rather than be pushed through to the back side. That's the point of that. So Deanna asked, does PFX only come in one color? Yes, it's really designed to be a base layer, and it does only come in one color at this time. Yes. Jan Scott says, can you use it to cut out shapes? I think we answered that. So we do cut out shapes. You can cut out shapes in pre-felt. So pre-felt can either be a base layer, a background layer, or it can be used so that you have more, I don't know, just room to explore in your surface design, more control in your surface design, because you can create all kinds of really fun gradations. And I do want to show you the back of this piece, which we've also made on our YouTube channel together. So this is part of our Artful Felt fabric series, where we made fabrics to then be used in later things. This is, we use like every fiber almost that we carry, every type of fiber. Here's some little pre-felt bits in here and some fabric. But the base layers of this piece are our Pfm Prefelt, our Pfl Prefelt. So you can see that it's thinner, like inch per inch. It's thinner than the Pfm, not very see-through. And then this is our silk gauze. So we just wanted to show that a variety of things can be used as a base layer in a wet felting project. And this is one example of a way to use pre-felt. So when you see me needle felting an image on the show, very often we get a question, is that pre-felt or felt? Pre-felt or felt? So just remember that pre-felt is partially felted, not completely felted, and it really is designed to be finished with a wet felting process. Any questions or thoughts there?
Lily asks, would you use a pre-felt to do a picture without wet felting?
I would not. I would not use a pre-felt to do a picture that would not ultimately be wet felted. If I want a fabric to hold a needle felted picture, I would either use fabric or I would use felt. And the reason I showed you the samples of felt that I did in the beginning is that you can make your own felt, right? You can make your own felt. It can look like anything you want, or you can use commercial felt. But I would not use a pre-felt for a picture that I did not intend to complete the felting process with a wet felting. I wouldn't, it needs to be shored up. Otherwise, it's going to be fragile. It's going to stretch. It's going to give way. Good question, though.
And in wet felting, can you layer pre-felt on pre-felt?
Yes, you can layer pre-felt on pre-felt. Yes, you can. You can lay pre-felt on pre-felt. Yes, you can. Great question. And play with it. Check out so we have our free class, as I mentioned, for making felt samples. Well, I think we work a little bit with the pre-felts in there, but just, make yourself these little samples and save them back so you can see, what does this material, this fiber that I've chosen, what does it feel like? What does it look like? How thick is it when I do this many layers or that many layers, or use this much weight per however many square inches? When I made this particular piece for my shoes, the lady who made the shoes said it had to be a 1/4 inch thick. I didn't have that much of this fiber, so I had to make a little sample to figure out how was I going to get this to be a 1/4 inch thick, when smashed. So make a little sample and play with it and see how you like it. The thing about fibers, when we wet felt them, they travel multiple directions, not just down. So fibers underneath may migrate up, they migrate this way and that way. So you want to see, do you get a halo? What happens when those two layers come together? Because very often the fibers that are underneath are going to travel up as well. So you want to see, how do you like the coming together of those layers? But you can also double the same color to make it thicker. And I've done that plenty of times. So yes, good. Good? Are we good? Good.
I think we're good.
So I know this is kind of like a little tech talk and a side note. I hope this is helpful for helping you figure out your felting needles and organize your felting needles and figure out the pre-felt. Try some pre-felt. We sell it in very small quantities, the same with the felt, and then we sell it in big quantities too. So play with it and see how you like it. We're going to give away some prizes, and next week we're going to needle felt a project together. So get your felting needles and your foam and all that stuff, and we're going to play together next week. Jordan has been writing down your names as you've been chiming in on the chat, and thank you so much for participating. We do have prizes to give away. Can I grab my prizes? Okay, so I can see what. Oh yes, I know what we're doing. Okay.
You first?
Thanks, Jordan. Me? No, I've been talking all hour. Thanks, y'all, for playing with us. And remember, if you're watching the replay and you're still here, well, then comment down below and you get a chance to win too. But now we're going to give away 2. What do you got?
I have Deanna Montgomery.
Very nice. And I have Yvonne Tolley. So congratulations, y'all. And thanks for hanging out with us all this time. We're going to give you a 12-pack of our needle felting tubes.
Ooh.
and a pack of felting needles of your choice. So if you're on our mailing list, or if you're not, even go to the contact us page on our website, let us know that you won, and tell us what size what style of felting needles you want for your freebie. We'll get those on the way to you. Thanks so much for playing. And hey, listen, we have lots of fun classes in our school. We mentioned the intro to wet felting. We also have this little gnome class for intro to needle felting. If you just want to play or maybe turn someone else onto it, those are both free. And we have some great classes, especially in needle felting, since that's what we're talking about today, or hybrid needle felting, wet felting, like these classes by Laura Ricks. Lots of fun. Those are live now. In 2 weeks, our guest is going to be Natasha Smart. She's coming all the way from the UK to teach you a fantastic project for wet felting on a ball. It's exciting. Huh? Like, she's known for wet felting on a ball. If you don't know who she is, one, I'm surprised. Look her up on Instagram, Natasha Smart Textiles. And then my friend Charity Vandermeer is coming all the way from Holland at the end of this month, and we're going to do wet felting wearables. So she's going to be recording. You'll get to meet her and learn more about her, but she does have a class in the school right now. So check it out, y'all, feltingtutorials.com. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Bye.